don't want to be alone like that, man. Don't leave me out there like that, Marvin. Please. Don't leave me alone out here, man.
Every character in Raising Kanan is slipping into darkness in some shape or form. Every one of them also have to eventually pay for their actions, sins, murders, or crimes, because they're all treading the fine line between survival and self-destruction. Some paid for their actions in the most brutal ways in 309, which again, gave us a harsh reality of this world and how it can destroy the lives of everybody around you. So today's theme is just like the episode title, Home to Roost, where consequences of choices made by certain individuals have a domino effect, which will alter the course of a few characters as we now know it, not just in Raising Kanan, but for the entire Power universe. So as always, stick with this breakdown till the end, because there are a bunch of hidden clues, meanings, and Easter eggs as we dissect all things Raising Kanan, Season 3, Episode 9. Now, this episode kicks off with Lou in a complete mess. He's drinking and driving, with the older Kanan's narration explaining how Lou is using alcohol and lies as a coping mechanism. The constant lies that Lou keeps telling himself while he continues to drink is just to help him navigate through his day and struggles with life. But the most damaging lies are the ones that involve false assurances about the future. The belief that things will start to get better, and tomorrow will be a new day, which isn't just deceptive, but also delusional, is false hope. So the overall narration conveys a message of Lou being trapped in a cycle of despair, which will only end in one way if he continues. Now, we see him coming to a liquor store to grab yet another drink, but when the shop owner starts to get a little cheeky, the situation quickly escalates to Lou pulling out his piece, but so does the shop owner, and on a different day, who knows, Lou could have even caught one as he was stumbling away, and that would have been lights out, but he seems to be living a life very similar to how his father lived during his closing moments. It's as if Lou has given up on life. Now with Ronnie, we pick up with him with his crew waiting for the next drop from Juliana. However, we know Juliana wasn't going to turn up because of Rock, and when the minutes ticked by, he wanted to get out of there because he could sense something just wasn't quite right. This is where we saw Joaquin and the Colombians box them in. They dragged Ronnie outside, patted him down, where he then came face to face with Joaquin. Joaquin let him know that his business with Juliana and any other kind of relationship that he had with her is no more, because she is no more. But the only reason why Ronnie was still breathing, because his investors, meaning Snaps and Pop, asked Joaquin to spare his life. The reason why they would have done so is because they've invested money into Ronnie. So if they gave the Colombians the go-ahead to get rid of him, that means they lose their money. Now, Joaquin also made it clear he was a man of his word. He not only promised Snaps and Pop he wouldn't get rid of Ronnie, but he also promised he wouldn't supply heroin in South Jamaica, because he has a deal with the other New York crime families, which we all know is the Italian-Vietnamese family who is supplying Rock. Now, Ronnie knew instantly that this was a move made by Rock, and he was fuming, but we are going to get to some of his moves later on. Now, just on a quick side note, notice the graffiti on Ronnie's van. It does seem like this is the same graffiti on the white van that's kidnapping Kanan, which we're going to see in episode 10. So it does seem like things are about to take a turn with their relationship, to the point where we see Ronnie kidnapping Kanan, so that's just something to keep in mind. But we are going to be dissecting their relationship a bit later on in this breakdown, as well as another clue of who Ronnie's next kill could be. Now, speaking of family, we come to Rock meeting Jukebox at Lamont's Diner. This is a spot where the entire family used to go together every Thursdays. It used to be their thing. Although it's been a while since we've seen the entire family sitting around one table, laughing and smiling, which is something we're probably never going to see again. But with Rock and Juke, these two have a special kind of bond, because when Marvin did his short stint in Elmira, Juke moved in with Aunt Rock. Rock has always been there for Juke, and I'm sure she always will be. But this is where she pulled out the army letter that got posted through a letterbox, because it slipped through to their old address by accident. Now, I did question how a family would react when and if they find out she was thinking about going to the military, because it is something she's been keeping very close to her chest. Initially, Rock thought it was Kanan, so she just opened it, but she questioned Juke, is this what you really want? Which is the problem. At the end of the day, not everybody has life figured out at the age of 18, and you're not supposed to. I can guarantee majority of the people listening to this wanted to do something completely different at the age of 18, or maybe you were studying something completely different to what you're doing at this moment in time. With Juke, we saw her constantly in two minds across season 3. Did she want to join the military and get out of Queens, or did she want to pursue singing? Which is where she was conflicted about what she wanted to do. She was confused. She knows she doesn't want to join the family business, that's for sure. She knows if she stays in Queen, then she'll end up falling victim to this vicious cycle of this life. So what does she do? Luckily for her, she did have this chance to make it big with music, which Rock did remind her of. Grab that opportunity with both hands and don't let it go. Now, we all know Jukebox isn't the only one at crossroads with a music career, so is Famous. He came to Cafe Vu because he was helping out Shirley while Lou was away, which pays for his studio time. However, at the back of Cafe Vu was Shirley with Little Guilford, who's an old friend of Shirley's. He's also someone who happens to own a couple of independent labels, and he also likes what he hears with 411, along with what comes with Famous. And so it does seem like this could be the big break that not just Famous was looking for, but also Lou. He asked who was behind the production of this music, which of course was Lou. And had he been there, who knows, it could have been just what he needed to get out of this downward spiral. Now, Little Guilford wanted to sit down with Famous and Lou to discuss the next steps, because he could see the raw talent where he could mold him to the way he likes. Very similar to how Simon Stern wanted to bring in Ghost on board. He could tell that Ghost had talent he didn't have, but he also wanted to bring him on board under his wing so he could mold him. Now, unfortunately with Lou, he was out in the wind. We saw Marvin coming over to his apartment because he hadn't seen him or heard from him in days. His apartment was a mess and so was he. We also saw Marvin go over to one of the cookhouses trying to find out information about his whereabouts, which is where he learned that Lou was seen robbing a liquor store. Now, following Ronnie having his supply cut off, he came to Snaps and Pop fuming, which is where we saw them clash. Snaps and Pop were sat here with Muscle around them, where they questioned Ronnie about him going behind Joaquin's back to get his product, but luckily for him, Joaquin came to Snaps first, otherwise he would have ended up right next to Juliana. Now, Pop also told Ronnie that he was going to have to figure out how to get his operation back up and running, because they made an investment. However, Ronnie's problem is he can't see past Rock. It is true that Rock did take out Juliana, but Snaps made it known she wasn't the one who took Snaps' money, he did. Now, with Lou missing and with Ronnie not in the best of moods after his supply was cut, I think Famous was the last person Ronnie wanted to see. Famous came over because he was wondering whether Kanan had seen his Uncle Lou, but instead, he was met by Ronnie, who put him up against the wall for talking too much. Although we did see Kanan eventually telling him Duke's got a gig and there was no way Lou was going to miss it, including him, which did raise questions with Ronnie. He asked him how can he be going to the mall when they've got issues with their operation, which is where we saw Kanan snap back. He told him he doesn't need to worry about what he is doing, and it is clear he isn't exactly scared of Ronnie. It's also why I believe Ronnie will be the one to kidnap him in episode 10, because that's the one way he can hurt Rock. Just like Howard said in season 1, to get to the Queen, sometimes you have to go through the Prince. Now, with Jukebox's gig, we saw her looking around at the crowd before she gave one hell of a performance. When she looked around, she saw everyone apart from one, Uncle Lou. But on her performance, she definitely owned that stage, so did Aisha and so did Crystal. They all put their issues to one side and worked together as a team, with Crystal even acknowledging just how well Duke led the group. But after Duke's performance, Rock and Marvin met with Kanan. She told him that they were going to have a family celebration in a few days, and he should roll through, which he said he didn't have time for. Now, Rock threatened if she makes one phone call, then he'll end up in prison, which was met with a similar response from Kanan. He said he could make phone calls too, which is where Marvin stepped in. He said he didn't give a shit about who his daddy was, is, or isn't. He'll take off his belt and whip him down right here, right now. But this is where we began to learn just how much of an influence Ronnie was having on Kanan. Not only was Kanan beginning to dress like him, but he was also poisoning his mind and twisting the truth, just like the older Kanan used to do with the younger Tariq.
See, I was right about Ghost. I'm sorry the cops didn't know it too.
What are they saying he did?
Whatever they saying he did that shit.
So it seems like Ronnie told Kanan Rock was the one behind Unique's disappearance, which of course she knows is a lie. We also know the truth, but Kanan doesn't. He said he trusts Ronnie more than he trusts his mother, at least at this moment in time. However, I do think that will change. Later on, he was summoned to a sit-down with Snaps, Pop, and Ronnie, and the way they were sat was very different to how they were in 308. It was Ronnie alongside Snaps and Pop, who were all saying the same. His mom's rock was a problem, and she had to be dealt with. Now, here's the issue for Kanan. Who does he side with? Will it be Ronnie or will it be Rock? I personally feel it is going to be a very similar situation to that of Tariq St. Patrick back in Power, when he picked his mom over the older Kanan. So he is in a bit of a dilemma, but from now to the end of episode 10, expect a lot of twists and turns and a lot of betrayal. And like I mentioned before, I would not be surprised to see it play out very similar to Tariq and the older Kanan. Now, just before we come back to Duke, with law enforcement, we saw Beck coming over to see Captain Baptiste to talk about Detective Howard, although this was a road that they've already been down with Shannon Beck, but her father Captain Beck made it known he was also a very well respected former member of the NYPD. So the more Beck started to reveal around Howard convincing Mr. Bingham to file a complaint against Shannon, and how they forgot to factor in one Laverne Thomas who said Shannon was innocent, it began to click for Captain Baptiste. Maybe there was some truth not in just what Captain Beck was telling him, but also his daughter's investigation. So Captain Baptiste made the call to Agent Tanner. with Agent Tanner, Captain Baptiste told him Howard was in line to take over Ogden's role at Queen's Narcotics, so it was important that they got down to the bottom of Captain Beck's accusations. But it was only when Agent Tanner heard the name Thomas, it started to ring alarm bells because he was investigating her father, Marvin Thomas. So now they were all putting the link together between the Organized Crime Task Force, Marvin, and Detective Howard. And just like how I always say, I don't believe in coincidences in power, Captain Baptiste said there's no coincidences in South Jamaica, Queens. Now, with Detective Howard, we saw a meeting with Rock. She told him that Lou was missing and it was also in his best interest to find out where he was. Because just like he's been saying, and just how Captain Baptiste just mentioned, they're all connected. So with the information from Marvin about Lou's whereabouts, we saw Howard calling in a favor, but we are going to get back to this later on. Now on Duke, her, Aisha and Crystal were looking on as Nkia was talking to some men in suits, who they believed to be label executives. However, little did Duke know, the sins of a family were about to turn her world upside down. It was Agent Tanner of the FBI, who was here to question her about her family's connection to organized crime. She was brought in and questioned around the connection between Detective Howard and her father. But as we've been saying all season, Duke is very street savvy. She knew they didn't have shit because if they did, they wouldn't be speaking to her. However, what Duke also realized was Agent Tanner probably ruined her chances to make it big with music because of her connection to the Thomases, who are being investigated for organized crime. Although we're not exactly sure what impact it will have, but I don't think Nkia will want to deal with the bad press that could come with Duke due to her connection with the Thomases. So after Agent Tanner's words, it actually does make sense why Duke would go on to later change her surname to Ghana. So I have no doubt Duke will change her surname to dissociate herself from the Thomas family, who are a well-known crime family in New York. Now, whether her dreams are completely shattered with music, I'm sure we're probably going to get the answers in episode 10, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is what pushes her to go down the military route. Agent Tanner also had Gerald Moore, who was also forced into working undercover. We saw Marvin coming over to meet him at a park, where it seemed like Gerald knew what he was doing was completely wrong. Marvin's just being there for him as a good friend, and you can tell he doesn't want to get him into trouble with Agent Tanner. Unfortunately, it was way too late. One way or the other, we all knew how Gerald's story was about to end, although I don't think we were expecting what happened with his daughter. Marvin caught up with him later on at hospital because tragedy struck. While he was busy doing drugs to take the edge off all the pressure he's been under, Alice drowned in the bath. This was also where Gerald finally opened up to Marvin about him working with the FBI, because he was caught with heroin, but it was way too much to write off as simple possessions, so they threatened him, and Marvin couldn't believe it because he felt so betrayed in this moment. But what saved Gerald from the wrath of Marvin was him receiving a pager from Rock, because Howard found Lou. However, with Gerald, I think we all knew what was going to happen. He went out with an overdose, and there goes Agent Tanner's snitch, along with leaving Gerald's remaining daughter as an orphan. The same also goes for Panessa's son Jerome. Joaquin mentioned his relationship with Juliana, and he knows there was only one person who walked in on them, Panessa. So could she also bite the dust in episode 10, and just like Alice, leave Jerome on his own? Now another quick one on Gerald. I have made it known in the past, just because characters are dead in power, it doesn't mean they can't have an influence, so the same goes for Gerald. So the question we should be asking is, what story did he write when it comes to Jukebox, and what issues will that cause for her with a music career if Gerald made links to the Thomas family and the Mafia? Again, this only further fuels the theory of why Duke could actually change her surname, so that's just a thought. Now with Lou and Detective Howard, Lou was shouting how he could solve every single murder on the south side, and rightfully so. Detective Howard threatened him, because you can't talk or behave the way Lou is at this moment in time. However, he wasn't the only one talking shit, so was Howard. When Rock came through, she confronted him about how he lied about the task force, because Marvin now knows they've been looking at him for months thanks to Gerald. Meanwhile, Howard was giving her false information.
What about that task force bullshit? What they getting into?
They ain't got nothing on nobody. No suspects at all.
So this is where Howard told Rock they need to put all this shit on Marvin. He needs to take one for the team, because the FBI aren't going away empty-handed. However, Rock did say she was never going to sell out her family, which I guess puts the theory to bed around Rock setting up Marvin to go to prison. But will Detective Howard? He's under some big pressure over at the precinct, facing all sorts of questions and accusations from Captain Baptiste and Agent Tanner. Now Howard cleverly flipped this on Captain Baptiste, because he was the one who told him to dead anything to do with Beck, which was because of the bad press, and also because of the fallout from Raut Sacristano. So he said he did go and speak to Mr. Bingham, but he told him to go to IAD and let them figure it out. On the Marvin Thomas shit, he said he didn't know anything about that, but will he give them Marvin to save his own skin? Based on what he told Rock, I really wouldn't be surprised. So let's see what Detective Howard's next move is, because if he doesn't do something to get the target off his back, he's gonna go down. So it really is between Marvin and Howard in episode 10. And if I were to make a prediction at this moment in time, I'm gonna say Agent Tanner will arrest Detective Howard. Now over to Lou, Rock and Marvin. We had Lou pleading for his life because he thought he was gonna get done, just like Rock done with Scrap. He told Marvin, "Don't let her kill me," but I think Rock has had enough. Although it is worth noting, they do love their little brother. Rock also mentioned that she wasn't going to give up Marvin to the feds even to save herself, so I don't think she's quite ready to give up on Lou either. I know it seemed like Marvin did give Lou his final drink, along with the older Kanan's narration speaking of how there were no deals to make. There was no more negotiating left to do. However, just like Unique said, if there's no body, he's still breathing, which also goes for Unique as well, by the way. But the older Kanan's narration also explores the prospect of how imminent death can strip away all that talk when they're forced to confront the reality of their choices and actions. So with that being said, I personally don't feel Marvin and Rock will be getting rid of Lou. I think they'll be taking him to a rehab center. Let's not forget, Unique spoke about a rehab center in 104 in a conversation with Davina, a spot outside Utica, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were taking Lou there. So now the floor is yours in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts and predictions following yet another great episode going into the last and final for Raising Kanan Season 3.